Hello everyone, my name is Doel Bose. I am a senior clinical embryologist and an IVF lab director at Indore Infertility Clinic. So today I am going to speak on yardsticks for selecting a perfect incubator. So selecting a perfect incubator is almost like selecting a life partner because number one, it is one of the most important decisions of your life. There is no one size fits all, and there is nothing like a perfect incubator. And much like choosing a life partner, the moment you commit to one choice, you will always find someone else walking out with a better deal. So fasten up your seatbelts because today we are about to witness the ultimate dating game for incubators. And remember, in both love and lab equipment, what is best is often in the eye of the beholder. So today we will briefly cover the following: types of incubator, yardsticks for comparison of incubators, comparing box type, comparing benchtops, comparing time-lapse, and finally a crisp take-home message. So incubators are equipment used to maintain controlled environment. Embryos need stringent control of the following parameters: temperature, CO2, oxygen, and humidity. So if we have to broadly classify incubators, we will classify them as box incubators or benchtops. Usually box incubators maintain controlled temperature and CO2, while benchtop incubators maintain controlled temperature, CO2, and oxygen. Technically, these days you find controlled oxygen box incubators too, but for IVF embryo culture, the running cost of a box with reduced oxygen will be too high due to its volume. Roughly, box incubators can be differentiated based on its size or volume and the type of sensor it has for measuring carbon dioxide or CO2. So there are two types of sensors for measuring CO2, that is TC or thermal conductivity sensors and IR, which is infrared sensor. Let's forget about the physics behind the sensors and only remember that thermal conductivity sensors have lower accuracy because they are dependent on temperature and humidity, but have significantly lower cost, as low as 20%, whereas IR sensors are highly accurate but have higher cost. In recent years, the cost of IR sensors have decreased considerably, making them more affordable. Benchtop incubators can be roughly classified based on source of the gas, number of chambers, and presence or absence of a time-lapse. We will come to this later. So which one do you need? A box or a benchtop? If we are still debating this, then I think we are practicing wrong embryology. Worldwide, the best practice is to go for elective single blastocyst transfer, which means our aim as embryologists should be to culture embryos till blastocyst stage for better selection. And it has been proven beyond doubt by many studies that extended culture of embryos is detrimental and not physiological at atmospheric oxygen levels of about roughly 20 to 21%. Just because blastocyst develops in a box incubator and looks good does not mean that all is okay with it. The epigenetic signature of blastocyst and gene expression is impacted due to the oxidative stress, and the impact of these changes might not even be evident immediately or antenatally. So as scientists, unless it is proven otherwise by more prospective studies on the long-term health of the progeny born out of atmospheric culture condition, let us all stick to what is more physiological, which is low oxygen tension of 5% and at times even lesser than 5%. So the verdict of box versus benchtop: you need both, no ifs, no buts. Now coming to a few box incubator terminologies that are relevant only for box incubators, as roughly 94% of the incubator air or the environment is defined by the ambient air, that is air circulating in the IVF lab. The rest of it is CO2, which is typically set to 6 or 7%. Temperature control system. In a box type incubator, the temperature control system is crucial for maintaining the optimal environment for embryo development. There are two main temperature control methods: air jacket or direct heat and water jacket. Air jacket systems are known for their quick response to temperature changes and hence a faster recovery, but at the same time they have low retention of heat and hence it will be impacted more in case of a power failure. Water jacket system, there is surrounding chamber filled with water that acts as a thermal buffer. It is almost like a double boiler. Water jacket systems offer more stable and even temperature control with fewer temperature fluctuations. They are often preferred for applications which are very sensitive to temperature, typically like embryology and IVF. A quick discussion on humidity. The Cairo consensus recommends the room relative humidity to be maintained at 40 to 45% at all times. But it does not define the humidity within incubators. So humidity is going to be important for box incubators where 94% of the circulating air is actually ambient air. Also, the culture strategy defines the impact of humidity on the embryos. So droplet culture without oil overlay is the only one that will be highly impacted by the ambient atmospheric percentage humidity. But I don't think anyone cultures without oil overlay these days, so we can ignore it for now. For box incubator, which is mostly used for equilibration of media, humidity I think is important. As shown in this graph, the best and the quickest recovery for humidity is when you have either an integrated water sink or an external water system like a humidification flask with a fan system. So these are images of different water reservoirs like a large pan and a small pan, and it is basic physics that larger the surface area, more the evaporation, and hence the humidity recovery is faster. Fact which is often overlooked when we discuss about humidity is the percentage relative humidity at different locations. As you can see, most of the months in a year, the percentage average humidity in Delhi is below the recommended level, while Mumbai is doing pretty much okay. Similar situation when it comes to Indore as compared to Bengaluru. Indore is falling below the recommended level of humidity in most months. So what is the impact of presence and absence of humidity on embryo culture? The advantage of having a dry culture is that it is good for the CO2 and other sensors and increases the life of sensor and other parts in the incubator. However, the downside is that there is a risk of increased osmolality due to evaporation of culture media, especially for extended or blastocyst culture. So classifying incubators based on humidity control. For a box incubator, presence of a humidification pan or a sink gives you a passive control over humidity, whereas presence of a humidification flask, which is external to the incubator with a fan to circulate the moist air, gives you an active control over humidity. Whereas for benchtop, the options are either presence of a humidification flask, or if you do not have a humidification flask or a sink, then there is no control over humidity. And such incubators are called dry incubators. So after going through some of the terminologies related to the box incubator, let us look into some common yardsticks for incubator selection. The obvious ones. The obvious ones are of course the cost of the incubator, the volume which depends on your caseload, accuracy of sensors and the temperature regulation, as well as the humidity regulation. Beyond the obvious ones, the not so obvious ones are the post-sale servicing, a very important factor, frequency of calibration, sensor life and availability of spare parts, and along with that at times the monitoring and alarm system. This brings us to our first task today, comparing box incubators. So box incubators would be compared based on cost, volume, the type of sensors, temperature control system, humidity regulation system, and monitoring and alarm system. So here I have listed a few of the very common box incubators that we use in Indian market, and they are listed alphabetically so that it doesn't look like I'm favoring one over the other. So the first one that we will look into is Astec. So Astec comes in variety of sizes, and the good part is that it suits the IVF lab by bringing in a smallest size of 30 liters. Of course, make is important because the availability of spare parts does depend on the country of origin. The type of sensor by default in Astec is a TC sensor, but you can always ask for an IR sensor. The temperature control system is air jacket. Humidification system is passive because it has a water pan and no external water flask or humidification flask. The next one that we will be looking into is Esco. Esco again brings smaller sizes with 50 liter as the smallest size, made in Singapore. The type of sensor is the IR sensor, and the temperature control is the direct heat or air jacket system. It again has a passive control with the presence of a water pan. Next, going to Hera Cell 150i, which is the older model, and 160i, which is the newer model. They are all, both of them are available in bigger sizes. The smaller size of Hera Cell is not available in the Indian market as far as my knowledge is concerned. The make is in Germany. The default sensor for a 150i is TC, whereas the newer model has an IR sensor. The temperature control system is again air jacket or direct heat system, and it is again a passive control. However, the control is better because of the water sink, which has a larger surface area. This brings us to Thermo Forma Series 2 and 3, one of the best incubators around because it has a green tick on all the parameters on Yardsticks that we discussed. The only downside is that it is available only in a large size of 184 liters. The sensor type, green tick, IR sensor. It is the only incubator around with a water jacket, which with a much better temperature control system. Humidification is again an active control with humidification flask as well as a water pan. And lastly, Memmert. Memmert is the newer one, and it's available in smaller sizes starting from 56 liters. I need to understand why a 56 and why not a 50. So it is made in Germany with an IR sensor, and the temperature control system, however, is air jacket or direct heat, but it is an active control on humidity with an external humidification flask as well as a water pan. Another differentiating factor for a box incubator is the sterilization cycle duration as well as the temperature at which the sterilization is done. A higher temperature ensures better sterilization, and of course for embryologists a shorter duration is preferable because it means that you have less downtime. So based on the sterilization cycle, Hera Cell 150i has 24-hour long sterilization cycle, which is the older model. The newer model has a 14-hour sterilization cycle and at a 180 degree centigrade temperature, which is much higher temperature and recommended one. Esco has a sterilization cycle of 15 hours. Thermo Forma has a sterilization cycle of 14 hours with 140 degree dry heat, and Astec has a sterilization cycle of 140 degree and 10 hours, whereas Memmert has a sterilization cycle of just 6 hours, and I think it is dependent on the size of the incubator. So now, finally, what would be the deciding factors for you to choose a box incubator? I think the first and foremost factor is it should have a fast temperature recovery, it should have IR sensors for CO2, and it should have an active humidity control. And of course, above all, the cost. Brings us to the next kind of incubator, which is a benchtop incubator. A broad classification of benchtop incubator would be based on the gas source and the humidification system. So the types of gas source option for a benchtop incubator would be either a gas premix or a gas mixer. In the gas premix, you would have one source, input source to the benchtop incubator, where this source is usually a pre-mixed gas delivered to you with the required concentration of oxygen and CO2. And by a gas mixer, what we mean is that you have different individual gases supplied to the benchtop incubator, which has its own gas mixer to mix the gas in the required percentage concentration. Humidification system in a benchtop would either be with a humidification flask, which means it is a passive control over humidity, and it is called a humidified incubator. Whereas if you do not have any such humidification flask in the benchtop, it means that it is a dry incubator. So the yardsticks for comparing benchtop incubators would be the cost of the incubator, the number of chambers, or more specifically the number of dishes cultured per chamber, the kind of gas source, humidity regulation system, presence or absence of a battery backup, which is an optional feature, and features of the monitoring and alarm system. So this brings us to comparison chart of the typical benchtop incubators available in the Indian market. So Astec has two series, the E series as well as the mini MN2 series. The E series has a 6 chamber and a 10 chamber option made in Japan. These Astec series, the 6 chamber has ability to culture 2 dishes. So the number of dishes you can culture is 12 or 20 depending on the size that you choose. The gas source is a gas mixer. It is a dry kind of an incubator with an optional pH meter. The mini in Astec has 2 chambers with ability to culture 2 dishes. It is a premix gas type and it has an optional water bed, making it an humidified incubator. Next is the Esco with 2 series, the Esco Miri Mini as well as the Esco Miri 12. So the mini size, you can culture 2 dishes per chamber, and so the total number of dishes would be 4 dishes, whereas the Miri 12 you can culture 1 dish per chamber with 12 chamber 12 lids size. It is made in Singapore, has an inbuilt gas mixer. The humidity chamber is optional, so you can optionally choose to have a humidified incubation, and it has an optional pH sensor. The next one is K systems with 10 chambers and ability to culture 2 dishes per chamber. So the total number of dishes you can culture is 20. It is made in Denmark. It has an inbuilt gas mixer. It is a dry kind of an incubator, but the benefit of having an equilibration chamber with it, which can be used in case your box is under a sterilization cycle. The next one is Minc Plus with the newer version having 6 dishes per chamber. So the total number of dishes that you can culture is 12. Well, there are pros and cons of having too many dishes per chamber, right? Minc, it is made in Australia. It uses a gas premix. It is again a humidified incubator with a good part of having an equilibration chamber inbuilt. The last one is Planner BT. It is actually just like the older Minc. So you have 2 chambers with ability to culture 4 dishes per chamber, made in UK, uses a gas premix and is an humidified incubator. Of all the available incubators, it is probably the only one with a 2-hour battery backup. Planner is almost like a Minc, but be cautious of the gas flow rate because the flow rate in Minc and Planner are different. So they cannot be cascaded or put in series using the same gas line, because that might affect your percentage CO2 at the benchtop level. Deciding factors for choosing a benchtop incubator would be the number of dishes per chamber, the lower the better, the kind of gas source, because it will completely depend on availability of proper gas mix cylinders at your wherever you are located, and the frequency of calibration of sensors if you happen to choose incubator with a gas mixer. Another factor which actually plays a very critical role in choice of an incubator is what model of an existing incubator do you have, and how many gas lines you have in your IVF lab, and what is the ease of adding one more gas line in your IVF lab. So all of these factors together combined help you choose the next incubator that you want to purchase. To the last kind of incubator that we will be comparing today, which is Time-lapse Incubator. So a broad classification of Time-lapse Incubator would be based on the image capture system and the data storage system. For an image capture system, you have two options. Either you have a fixed camera with moving dishes, or you have fixed dishes with a moving camera. I don't know about others, but I think I would be very comfortable if my dishes are not moving around. The second kind of classification would be based on the data storage mechanism. So whatever data is being captured can be either stored in a network server, which is available locally at your IVF clinic, or a cloud-based system. So the yardsticks for comparison of a time-lapse incubator would be cost, the paramount one, the number of patients, and more specifically number of embryos per patient that you can capture images for, the image capturing system, the data storage system, the storage hardware. Actually, the size of the data storage is very important, and presence of an AI support for decision making with the software in the time-lapse system. So these are the time-lapse systems available in the market. The first one alphabetically would be Astec. It has ability to capture images for 9 patients, 9 dishes with 25 embryos each. The software storage system is a network admin server or a NAS server with 6 terabyte into 2, means 2 hard drives of 6 terabytes with a mirroring function. So basically the network storage means that the data is captured locally in your clinic and it is not stored in a cloud. The image capturing system here is the camera is moving and not the dishes. So it has one camera with 1.3 megapixel CCD camera. CCD actually is a better sensor for imaging, and the only downside is currently it does not have an integrated AI support, but I've heard that, but I think very soon they are going to integrate with a cloud-based AI system. The next one would be Embryoscope, which is actually the oldest in the market. It has 3 models: Embryoscope, Embryoscope Plus, and Embryoscope Flex. The number of patients that you can culture in Embryoscope is 8 with 16 embryo each. The Embryoscope Plus has 15 patients worth 16 embryos each, and the newer one is the Embryoscope Flex, specifically made for poor responders, where you have 24 patient worth dishes and 6 embryos each. The storage of the data is on the Embryoscope server. I could not figure out whether it is a Synology server or not. I could not find it out in the specification, but it definitely stores the data on the local network. It has one camera, but the difference between this and the others is that instead of the camera moving, here the embryo dishes are rotated. It uses a 2.2 megapixel CMOS camera. It has an inbuilt IDA score and KIT score for AI-assisted embryo grading and prediction. The next one would be Esco Memmert TL6 and 12, where the difference is in its size, where TL6 you can culture 6 patient worth of embryos, 14 embryos each in each dish. It stores its data on a NAS Synology server on the local network with 2 10 terabyte hard drives, which is actually a good size. It has one camera and it has fixed dishes, and the camera is moving and not the dishes. The inbuilt AI support is with Chloe EQ, which is a decision support system. The last one is Geri. Geri actually has many features which almost sound like wow, but unfortunately I think it is not available in the Indian market. It has 6 patient worth of culturing system with 16 embryo each. The downside is that it has a cloud-based storage system, which means it is completely dependent on internet. It has an individual camera per chamber. So not only does it have one camera, fixed dishes, here each chamber has its own camera, its own temperature and CO2 control with own CO2 sensors and own temperature control sensors. I don't know whether we would ever come to a place where we would be culturing individual chambers at different temperature. It would be interesting to see that. and it also has an inbuilt automated AI based viability prediction system called EVA. So these are the comparisons of the time-lapse incubators. The deciding factor here, of course, would be the first one would be cost here. Then for the cost, you should see the number of patients that you can culture and the number of embryos you can culture per patient. The data storage location is paramount for us because in India, I think it makes more sense to store the data locally in a NAS server. And AI integrated software would be a nice to have because many a times we offer time-lapse features to our high-end patients because of the cost, and AI software integration gives a good reporting and predictability score. So this brings us to the end of our presentation. So the take-home message from this session, coming to it, I think the first take-home message is that you need both box type and benchtop incubators. Benchtop is not optional. Humidified or not humidified completely depends on your culture strategy, the ambient average humidity at the location, and also the fact that needs to be clearly remembered is that humidity will have effect only when you culture without oil and in small droplets for an extended period, and the effect of humidity will be more pronounced only when you have a box incubator. The effect of humidity is less pronounced when you have a benchtop incubator. The third point would be that there is no one incubator which is the best. So choose your options depending on your lab requirement, on your budget, on the ambient humidity and all other factors in your lab. And lastly, incubator, just like marriage, is not just a one-time thing. You need to work on it to maintain its general health so that it performs optimally. So I hope that with this session you have gathered information enough to choose your next incubator. Thank you so much for your patient hearing and your time. Signing off is Doel from Embryology, and here are the references that I have used in the presentation. So you can always get in touch with me to know more about the same. Thank you so much.